In this video, we want to see how to do some hypothesis testing using data we are going to download from here. So if you take a look at the exercise we did last time, well, the exercise that was posted, the activity that was posted, it was for unemployment. So I'm going to click where we have labor market, and I'll just click to download the data. Once I click to download it, the data will be downloaded. You can see downloaded inside my download folder, and I'll just move to my download folder and double click to make sure I get the data. So I have labor market data. I'll double click to open it in Microsoft Excel, and that should in principle do it. If it doesn't do it for you, just go to data and then you use get data and you can immediately import it. It's a CSV file. Import the data. Okay, here I am. I will not do any changes to it because I want to show you a different approach of doing changes to your data set. Okay, click anywhere inside. We are going to pivot the data and I'll do some manipulations. So even if you pass through Power Query, you should not do any changes to your data and it will still work fine. So I'll click anywhere inside, go to Insert. I'll click on Insert, go to Pivot Table. I'll click there, go to From Table Range, and then I will OK. Now here is my pivot table. Now before I start pivoting, I want to do some adjustments. I want to first of all insert a timeline and a slicer. So I will go to timeline, I'll click on it, check that box, OK. Now let me just explain how did I get to timeline. Just make sure this is active and then you go to pivot table analyze, you will be able to find timeline. Now I've chosen the timeline. I want to come here where you see months. There is a drop down. I'll click and I'll take years. And I just want to take a look at the last 2 years. So I'm going to click where you have 2024. I'll come here, click and hold, drag it to have both of those years. And I'll move it and put it somewhere here. The next thing, I'll click here, go to pivot table analyze, go to slicer. And now I want a slicer for region, indicator, sex, and age group. I will OK. I'll place all of them here depending on the size of your screen. I'll place everything there. Just any arrangement that enables you to be able to manipulate your things, go for it. Okay. Now here I can see the different provinces and regions. Let me click here and increase the size here, or if I want, I can just do that and increase that to 2. Okay, so now that I have all of this, I've already chosen the time period. The second thing I want to do is to choose unemployment. So I want my analysis to be on unemployment. I want to take both sexes. I want 15 years and above. And now I want to choose 2 provinces. I'll click on Quebec. I'll hold down the Control key and I'll click on Ontario to choose those 2 provinces. Once I've done that, I'm ready to pivot my table. I'm going to come and click here. And I'll come in here and I'll take date and put it where we have rows. Well, if yours doesn't explode and give you these options, just take off everything. You are still fine. So I will not be using any of this. It automatically generates it for me. Maybe for the Mac it doesn't do that. That's no problem. Just use your date. And that's the date I'm going to be using. Now I am going to take region and put it where we have columns. And then I will go to value, drag it and put it where we have values. Now I want to change it from count. So I'll click on it, click on value field settings, take average, and I want to adjust the format. I'll click on number format, take number. I want to make sure it's 2 decimal places. OK and OK. Now I do not want any total, so I will click on design, the ribbon design. I'll go to grand totals, click the drop down and take the first one, which is off for rows and columns. And here I am. So now I'm ready to start. I can see the unemployment rate for Ontario and Quebec because those are the 2 places I want to compare. So what I'm going to do, as we've seen in class, I'll start by writing my null and alternative hypothesis. I'm going to be using E to write whatever I want to do. So I'll start with the null hypothesis. I'll click here. And okay, before I do that, I'll just click on column E and then I'll click on bold so that everything I type here will be bold. So I'll come here and do H O and my null hypothesis, normally I want to say the mean of this first area is different from that. So the hypothesis we want to test if statistically the unemployment rate for Ontario and Quebec are the same or they are different for this time period. So what we will be doing is a two-tailed test, because the null hypothesis will be the mean of Ontario equals the mean of Quebec, and the alternative hypothesis, which can be denoted by HA, will be the mean of Ontario and Quebec are different or are not equal. Okay, now I'll come here and put those things. How do you go about doing it? If I go to insert, to the insert ribbon, I can see symbols here. So if I click where you have symbol, I can search. I will find mu. So I'm looking for mu. I'll click on mu, click insert, and I'll click mu a second time, click insert and close. Now what do I want to do here? I'll just click in here and I'll say mu1. I'll type 1 in front, give myself some space, equal, create space, go at the end and say mu2. Okay, so mu1, which is Ontario, equals mu2. The alternative will be mu1 is different from mu2. So I'll go back to symbol and I'll take mu, insert. This is different. Let me see. Where do I have different? Here it is. I'll click here, insert, click on mu, insert, close it, and come here and put 1 in front of the mu and 2. Now, by the way, if you can't find these things, just write it by hand. Okay, it really doesn't matter. Okay, actually we could have used X bar. X bar is the more appropriate one, given that we are using samples. Okay, I won't go back and put X bar, but that is the more appropriate one. So if I were you, just search for where you can find X bar in here. If you search for it, you should, let's see, do we have X bar anywhere? Yeah, so I'll just let you search for it so that the video is not too long. If I start searching, it may take me a bit more time. Search for it. If you find X bar, you go for it. Okay, so that's the null and alternative hypothesis. The next thing we want to do is to enter the level of significance. So I'll come and double click between E and F to increase that space. The level of significance is 0.05. If you want, you could use 90%, but I've chosen 95% or 0.05. The next thing we want to do, we just want to give the name of the regions. So I'll say regions, and I'll say Ontario. Actually, I will not type it. I will take it from here and you will see why. So I'll click there, I'll put equal, and I'll come and click here and hit enter so that automatically I'll have what's there. I'll do the same here, equal, and I'll take whatever is here and I'll hit enter. I'll just select just those two and make it bold. Control B, Command B for the marks to make it bold. Now under the region, I want to compute the mean. So the mean, let me just put what I want to, standard deviation, so those are the things I want to compute. So for the mean, I'll come there, start with the equality sign and type AVA average. Okay, we want to use the average. I'll hit my tab key and I'll come and select the range here. Click, hold my key, drag, release and hit enter. Standard deviation, I'll start with equality sign, STD. So this is the one I want. So I'll just double click on it because we are dealing with sample, and then I'll select that and hit enter. Sample size, I'll start with equal. We want to count. I'll hit the tab key, select that and hit enter. And then I'll select all of this, move here. When the cursor changes, hold down, drag and release it. So now we have the mean, standard deviation and sample for both of them. So the next thing I want to do, I want to conduct a t-test. Now what the t-test does is that it's not just, generally what we do in class is that we compute the test statistic, and using the test statistic we go and look for the p-value. Now the t-test combines it into one and just gives you your p-value. So what are we going to put here? I'll say conduct a t-test. Why are we doing a t-test? Because our sample size is less than 30. If our sample size were greater than 30, then we will be conducting and we will be using a standard normal test. But in this case, we have to do a t-test, well, the student t-test, because this is what's going on. So there are two things you need to know. You need to know the type of test. It's a student t-test. The second thing is you need to know if it is a one-tail or a two-tail test. And from here you can see that we are dealing with a two-tail test. If we were saying something is greater than, or we were saying it's less than, that would have been a one-tail test. So conducting the t-test, we start with equal. It's pretty straightforward. You do t.t.test. So this is the test, okay? It says return the probability associated with a student's t-test. So you don't need to compute the test statistic. You need to do this directly to have the probability. If you are doing it by hand, you have to compute it and then move on. Now, by the way, just to let you know, the formula, if you want to compute the test statistic, is slightly different from what we are seeing in class. If you want, I can give you that formula. However, what we are doing here just helps you. You don't need to go through that stage. So I'll hit my tab key and I have to select. So it says array 1. So for Ontario, we need to give the range of data for Ontario. I'll click here and drag. So this is the first region. I'll put a comma when I'm done with that. And I'll select for the second region, click, hold, drag. Once I'm done with that, I'll put a comma and it wants me to give the number of tails. We know that we are dealing with a two-tail test. So I'm going to click here for two-tail, or I'll just type 2. Okay, I'll just type 2 and I'll put a comma. Now what do we want? We are simply saying the two sample has unequal variance. if you look at the standard deviation, you can clearly see it's not equal. So we are dealing with a situation where we don't have the same variation. Now, by the way, just know that the standard deviation is the square root of your variance. So you can clearly see it's not the same. So we are going to put 3 to say we are dealing with that situation. Then once you close it and you hit enter, it's going to give you what the probability is. You can see it's using E, telling you it's very small. So the last stage of your analysis is to compare p-value to the level of significance. So this is your p-value. You want to compare it to the level of significance. So we'll say compare to alpha. Alpha is your level of significance. Okay, I'll double click here. And we want to make it do it automatically. For that, I'm going to use an if function. So I'll say equal, and I'll say if, and I'll hit my tab. So I want to compare. So we are going to use a logical operator. I want to compare these two. I'm going to say if this value, so I'll click here, if my p-value is less than, okay, if my p-value is less than the level of significance, which is here, what should it do if this is true? We put a comma. So you start with your logical, then you tell it what it should do. Given that we want it to use characters, we should start with quote. So I'll hit this and I'll say it should, so if it's like that, it should reject H0. And I'll close it. And I'll put a comma. So if this condition holds, reject H0, it will automatically tell me reject H0. However, if this condition fails, then it's going to do what? I'll open a new one and I'll say fail to reject H0. I'll close it and then I'll close it. Now you can see it has 3 conditions. It has 3 elements. The first one is you put in your logical condition. The second is you tell it what happens. So if this condition holds, reject H0. If this condition fails, fail to reject H0, then I'll hit enter. And you can see that it has compared it and it tells me this value is less than this. This value is very small. So this value is less than this. So we should reject H0. What does it mean rejecting H0? It simply means that the unemployment rate of Ontario is statistically different from the unemployment rate of Quebec. That's just what it's saying. They are not the same. They are not similar. They are statistically different. So that is basically what we've done. Now we need to put a graph and then play a bit. So the last thing we are doing, I'll click in here in order to generate a pivot chart. So you simply go to Pivot Table Analyze, you click on Pivot Chart, and you take the column as the default, you OK, you place it somewhere there. If your screen is small, you can place it there. Okay, let's place it here. And the next thing, I want to put this below. I'll go to Design, go to Add Chart Element, Legend, and put it at the bottom. And that is it. So now I'll just bring these things a bit closer so that we can play with them with no problems. Now, what do we want to do? You can now investigate you can ask different interesting questions. Let's say you want to see if for Quebec and Ontario, if the unemployment rate between Quebec and Ontario, let's even change it. We are dealing with unemployment rate. What if you want to investigate the participation rate? Are they statistically the same in the two provinces? If you click participation rate, you see things change automatically. You'll see that the participation rate, you reject H0 saying no, they are not the same. What about the employment rate? And you can even see in your chart that they are not the same. You click on employment rate and you can also see that, yeah, they are not the same. What about the unemployment rate? Let's go back to unemployment rate and let's check for a particular age group. Let's say 55 years and over. If I click on 55 years and over, it says fail to reject H0. You can see they are very close. So it's saying statistically they are the same. So it's just telling you between Ontario and Quebec, for this age group, the unemployment rate is the same. What about the participation rate? Is it the same? You can clearly see it's not the same, so it fails to reject. What about employment rate? You can see it's not the same, it fails to reject. However, for unemployment rate, you can see it's the same. What if you want to verify if the unemployment rate from 15 years and over between Quebec and Canada, okay, Canada as a whole, are they the same? So for that, I'll click on Quebec and I'll hold down my control key, command for those who are using Mac, and I'll click on Canada and I'll release it. Then you can clearly see that they are not the same. What if I want to check for Alberta, Quebec and Alberta? I hold down my control key, I check on Canada to unselect it, then I now click on Alberta to select it and I release it. You can clearly see what's going on. So create something like this because it makes it really interesting for you to ask all sorts of questions, and I hope this is helpful. So the main difference is that you do not need to compute a t statistic, the test statistic, and then use the test statistic to search for the p-value. You simply get your p-value immediately using t-test. So I hope that works for you. If you have any challenges, let me know. Else, have fun with this, and we will have some other projects which will use exactly this approach. Now, just to tell you, if you have a situation where you want to check if you do not want this pair of hypotheses, let's say you are interested in something being greater than or less than, it simply means when you come to compute your t statistic, here where you have 2, you will not have 2, you will now have 1. You will put 1, and it's so if it's a one-tail test, you will put 1 here and it's going to do that for you. Okay, have fun with this, and that's it.